Hi everybody! I'm going to do something completely different today. I thought it would be really fun to do something that I don't see other artists doing, and that is doing a whole series of time-lapse pieces, different mediums, and stuff like that. But let's get right into it. Thank you so much for watching. So on this particular one right here, this donkey one, I wanted to show and just everybody, if you go back to the very beginning and watch, how I used pointillism, just different points to do out my measurements, position my donkey, and then fill in with the hatchwork and the sketching. I'm going to kind of, with this one, I did something a little bit different. Because I already knew the basic shapes and I'm very familiar with the shapes of birds and crows, I didn't do as much pointillism. I went ahead and went right into the sketching and doing the lines. Now I have no preliminary graphite sketch on these particular ones, so that's kind of why you can use the points, which is the dotting before you do the sketching, to figure out where everything's going to be. Because if you're like me and you don't usually do graphite pre-sketches, then you're going to need to do that. I do the same thing with when I'm doing the charcoal pastels, and I've mentioned it in other videos when I'm doing the charcoal pastels, of putting down the basic outlines, points, positions of things before getting right into it. I did want to do some more cat artwork, so that's why you have some cats in this lineup of time-lapse pieces. Now this is one of the new series that I've been doing, which is a kind of a mixed media, and well, several of them are mixed media. A few of them aren't as mixed media and they're just acrylic, but and it's difficult to see in this particular one that I'm doing right here, but there is several different layers. A first finger painting layer, then a smearing layer, and then I actually am using this thing called unicorn spit, which gives a illumination layer. And if you have it in the right light, you will see, I don't want to say glitter because it's not a glitter, but it kind of is a dust like that. And this particular fish is a little fish hiding in the wreaths, and it came out really, really great. I really love it. It's beautiful, and it is kind of camouflaged. And before I put on the layer, any kind of protective layer, I'm trying to show you here that sheen is the powdery unicorn spit stain that I'm trying to show you here in this image. Now in this one I did not use the sheen, the stain, because I really loved how bright all the colors were in here. This is the theme of the protecting eggs and seeds. I no longer have this one. This one is sold, but I still wanted to show the time lapse. And I think with a lot of the videos they do in this format, I'm also going to tell you like the ideas and how some of the stuff comes about. And this is, I'm showing you a clip here of the speed I'm actually painting in versus time lapse. But with some of these, with most of all of these fifth element, which is the fire, water, wind series that I've done, at consciousness, and I start with the finger painting. I start with just getting the colors on there, so it's all by feeling your inspiration, and then I can see things. Like, I don't know how to explain other than that, but I will things will stand out to me, and I will go from there to sharpening up those things, finding the life in it, if you will. Kind of a lot of the fifth element series is just based on life happens, right? That's what we just keep surviving, and other things keep surviving because we're designed so perfectly well, and all part of the perfect plan, right? So in here you can see where I'm doing a little bit more pointing, like I'm just going into different areas and sizing out where I want everything. I did have a reference for this one, and my regret with this one is that I did not use a little bit more artistic license. I did it really using a reference where I was the cat straining to look over its shoulder, and that the final product kind of made it look like it was off, and I should have used artistic license and corrected that, despite the fact that it wouldn't have been very much like the reference, because it just looks off when that's actually what it kind of looked like. And of course I have to throw in some more of our little rodent friends. I like painting small creatures with large eyes, and I want to do another hamster. I don't have very many hamsters in my run, so I did another hamster, but this time I did it in charcoal and pastel. And again, I find the subject and I find the things around him, and then I keep going lighter, darker, darker. This technique right here that I'm doing, again, it's another layer on top of the finger painting layer. So you have these finger painting layers, and this one you can kind of see the sheen behind this, which is the unicorn spit. And then I did another layer of acrylic, and then on top of that, how you see it bead out is I'm using alcohol, and while it's wet it will bead out, as long as it's on something slick. Like the layer that protected the layers below that was the glaze that was on top of the sheen and all that. So, but I will show that again in more videos if you're interested in seeing that, more of that technique. And I decided to do another rabbit. I keep getting really low on rabbits, and everybody loves a bunny. Well, not everybody. I guess some people don't like bunnies, but I really love bunnies. So, and then we're sketching another cat here where you can see a little bit more of the pointillism that I'm talking about, which is point to do all the measurements to get everything in the right position, and then coming back in to really finish up my lines. Again, this is just recommended if you don't do preliminary sketching with graphites, and I find it to be much more freeing and training my eye to position everything in the right positions before. It's kind of like measure before you cut, okay? That kind of philosophy, measure twice before you cut. Well, I'm using pointillism in a lot of my pieces, and you can see it in this one where I did an outline of my points, made sure everything was in the positions I wanted them in, and then I kind of came in with all of the cross hatching and the lines to bring out the illustration. And this one again, so I started this one. I did this one a little bit different. This does not have unicorn spit in it. It is just the acrylic. It does not have a glazing layer. Well, it does have a glazing layer in between my acrylic layers. I cannot say it doesn't, but it's a diluted glazing layer. I diluted it with a little bit of water in my paintbrush and then the glaze, and squished it all around, and it created a crackling effect. And it's really hard to kind of see in this clip here, but underneath those layers you can actually see this beautiful aged crackling look. I put this clip in here because I wanted to talk about this red gold layer stuff that's in here. It does oxidize underneath the glazes, and it turns really, really dark, kind of giving it a moon effect. So it will be kind of a gold, but there'll be really dark oxidization in that moon shape on the heron one. So what I did is I did the finger painting layer. I figured out the composition, what I wanted on the piece. I did a glazing layer on top of, again, the unicorn spit or stain that gives it the illumination. Then I did my gold, and then I did the heron on top of the gold, and I'll come in with another glaze layer. The glaze layer will not prevent that oxidation on the moon. It will still turn these more of a gray moony color. And so that sort of worked out, although I was a little bit surprised by the effect. I'm finding that one of the ways that you can help prevent that gold from changing colors is to put a glue layer over it, but I'm sure there's better methods too. Back to sketching here, I threw this one in because I wanted to go over it. Like when I was putting in the heron being so much lighter, light like the paper, the way to get the heron to stand out was to put it in its grassy field and darken the values of all of the back of the field. Again, when I'm doing my sketching and my drawing, I really am sketching and hatching and drawing values and shapes of those values to get these creatures. So it's not like I'm just drawing something going, oh, that, because that's where a lot of artists, I think, get lost of this drawing doesn't look right. Well, it's because you need to, just like when you paint, just like here, you're putting in a certain value that's a certain shape in a certain space, and your subject and your creature, it'll automatically come out, you know what I mean, if you do it in the right place and the right measurements. So again, to the thing that I always have, I always recommend people follow, which is my GSMG, my technique, which is the values, the measurements, the sizes, and the shapes. If you have your values right, in the right shape, in the right measurements, and size those measurements correctly, you're automatically going to end up with what you're looking at. So when you can hone everything down to that technique, which again I'll go over in many videos and I have in the past, to really clarify, that allows you to be able to just look at something and go, okay. And sometimes, like in this picture, I can use the eye as a reference. The size of the eye, I will use a reference for all the other measurements in the sketch or in the painting. And I'll be like, okay, so the ear is, just this is an example. So the ear is basically 6 eyes long. The chin is 3 eyes down. And then you automatically kind of use the pointillism, size everything out, and you can pull the rest of it together. Again, use some artistic licensing and changing things the way you is the most beautiful to you. Like I said, I should have done that on the one cat charcoal pastel sketch because it really just looked funky, like my reference, rather than being as beautiful as it could be if I had used artistic license. I was doing another carousel there, and so again, I'm kind of showing a little bit of the pointillism technique, as well as just sketching in some branches, some leaves. Well, you'll notice a lot of these composition. I am really also focused when I'm creating something in putting, using the golden ratio and putting a lot of my sketching and my subject matter into the painting in a way where it not only draws your eye in, but so nothing's like right in the middle of my page, because it doesn't, I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't look as good to the human brain, and it's not, it's kind of like, oh, here is something, rather than here is a story. And you really kind of want more of a story, and not to necessarily place things right in the middle of the page, unless you can draw them off to the side, or more often to a half of page. Or so just kind of, you could use a golden ratio tool to help you with this, but you will also just begin to kind of get an idea of, here's 1/3. You can always break everything down into 1/3. Like the eyes of this cat, for instance, are 1/3 down from the top. Pretty much the darker shapes will be up in that 1/3.